Today is the auspicious occasion of opening ceremony of the 10th International Retreat at the Forest Meditation Center. Sayadaw welcomes our Dhamma relatives, the Asian relatives, world relatives, samsara relatives, as well as the Dhamma relative. Dhamma Kamo Bhavan Hoti, as the saying goes, the one who cherishes the Dhamma prosper. So yogis who are here, they left behind family members, friends, their businesses, their jobs in order to join this retreat. So Sayadaw is glad to see the yogis who are giving up these worldly things which are difficult to give up in order to join this retreat here. And Sayadaw welcomes all our Dhamma relatives. Yogis will be practicing the Dhamma, the practice that uplifts the practitioner so that the person will not be inferior or the person will not be degraded. And Sayadaw is happy to help the yogi with the Dhamma. So Sayadaw wishes that all of you here will be able to gain victory on internal enmity that has been following throughout the round of existences. Nowadays, we call meditation center as Sasanayita, meaning meditation center. In the word Sasanayita, Sasana means the teaching of the Buddha. The teaching of the Buddha in order to purify one's body, speech, and mind. The teachings of the Buddha consist of 3 trainings: Sila, Samadhi, Panya, that can eradicate the internal enmity. Having the internal enmity, one ends up committing wrongdoing by body, speech, and mind that are rude, burning, detestable. By practicing the teachings of the Buddha, which consists of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, one is making one's body, speech, and mind pure, clean, and blameless. Meditation Center, Sasanayita, is the place where one extinguishes the internal enmity so that one's bodily behavior, mental behavior will be pure and clean. In Pali, it is called Asama. Asama means the place where one extinguishes the internal enmity, raga, dosa, moha, lust, anger, and delusion, which has been torturing within oneself. Asama is called in Pali, and in Burmese it is called Sasanayita. Asama is the Pali word made up of A and Sama. A means diligently, and Sama means place where one extinguishes the internal fire of raga, dosa, moha. When it is said that one should extinguish, it means that one should extinguish the internal enmity. One should have victory on these internal enmity, raga, dosa, moha. Internal enmity means raga, lust, being attached in various objects, sensual objects, as well as one's life. Dosa is anger, hatred, aversion that arises when one comes across undesirable objects. Moha is delusion, not knowing, knowing wrongly, being dim and vague on the truth. So these defilements, raga, dosa, moha, are very inferior and they are frightening. Because these defilements torture and torment the person, and thus the person suffers. So these defilements should all be extinguished. In order to extinguish these defilements, one should practice sila, samadhi, panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom. In practicing sila, samadhi, panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom, in order to extinguish the internal enmity, one should not do it with ordinary effort, but one should do so diligently so that one can have victory on these internal enmity. One can overwhelm, one can gain the upper hand. Why do we need to extinguish these defilements? It is said that 100% of the suffering that are encountered by beings are caused by defilements. Raga, dosa, moha, these internal enmity are creating 100% of suffering to the beings. All the sufferings are rooted in these defilements. That's why one should not accept these defilements. One should eradicate these defilements which are the causes of suffering. When a person is accepting these defilements, entertaining these defilements, the person will suffer. These defilements torment the person so that the person suffers. Indulging in these defilements, the person commits wrongdoing by body, speech, and mind. And due to this misconduct, the person suffers more in the future as well. That's why it is said that defilements lead to suffering. These defilements, raga, dosa, moha, are the internal enmity that are most frightening. They are the nearest internal enemy. Asama is the place where one practices sila, samadhi, panya in order to gain victory on these defilements. So one should practice the three trainings, sila, samadhi, panya, in order to eradicate these defilements which are the causes of suffering. And one should practice these trainings diligently, ardently, in a very urgent way, in order to extinguish these defilements. One should gain victory on enmity. There are two kinds of enmity. The first one is kilesa vera, defilement enmity, or in another way, they are also called akusala vera, enmity, unwholesome deed enmity. And the second one is pukala vera, enmity in the form of person or being, or they can also be called enemy. The first one, kilesa vera or akusala vera, enmity in the form of defilements or unwholesomeness, they are not within. These enmity are not from the outside, they are not from other person, but they are within oneself. Kilesa Vera, Akusala Vera are arising in oneself. Lust arises when one comes across desirable objects and sensual objects. Anger, aversion, hatred arises when one comes across undesirable objects. Delusion, not knowing the truth, knowing wrongly, arises when one is dim and vague on the truth. So the raga, dosa, moha, they are the internal enmity. They are kilesa vera, defilement, enmity. Unwholesome deeds that are associating with the defilements, they are akusala vera, unwholesome deed, enmity. They make the person suffer, they lead to bad results, and they are called vera, enmity, and they are very frightening. The second one is pugala vera, enmity in the form of person or being. In other words, they are enemy. The second one, pugala vera, is the external enmity. Among the two types, kilesa vera and pugala vera, kilesa vera is the nearest internal enmity, and thus kilesa vera is more frightening. The second type, pugala vera, one encounters the second type, pugala vera, only from time to time. It is not as frightening. Pugala vera is not as frightening as the first one, because pugala vera, the enmity in the form of person or being, cannot make the person inferior or degraded. It cannot make the person inferior to the next existence, but it can only make the person suffer physically and mentally. But it is not as frightening as the first one, kilesa vera. What is more frightening is the first one, kilesa vera or akusala vera. When one indulges in these defilements, one commits wrongdoing by body, speech and mind, and thus the person becomes inferior and degraded. The cetana, the volition, is bad, and due to this bad volition, one becomes inferior and degraded throughout the round of existences. So among the two kinds of enmity, the internal enmity and external enmity, internal enmity is more frightening. It is necessary that one have victory on the internal enmity. Buddha had taught ways in order to overcome the internal enmity, and Buddha emphasized on the way to overcome, the way to gain victory on the internal enmity. The way that Buddha had taught is the way Buddha himself practiced, and Buddha guided the beings how to overcome, how to gain victory on these internal enmity. The internal enmity has three stages. Vitekama kilesa, transgressive defilements which lead to transgression by body, speech, and mind. Priyuttana kilesa, obsessive defilements that can arise in the mind, and anusaya kilesa, latent or dormant form of defilement. There are 3 stages of defilement, and there are 3 ways to cure these 3 stages of defilement. In order to overcome gross form of defilement, one has to practice sila, morality. Samadhi, concentration, has to be practiced in order to overcome medium form of defilement. And by developing knowledge, panya, one can overcome, one can remove the refined form of defilement. One has to practice sila, samadhi, panya in order to overcome gross, medium, and refined form of defilement. Most of the people, they seek for their personal gain, they seek for their own benefit and welfare. When one becomes extreme in seeking for one's own benefit, then it is selfishness. Usually, people seek for their own benefit, and nowadays, selfishness is overwhelming the world. When one works hard for one's personal gain, one's own benefit, by working hard, one's standard of living may be high. But one does not seek for the welfare of others, however conditioned others may be, they do not care, as they are being selfish. Not seeing the welfare of others, these people are being selfish. They are lacking metta, loving kindness. Being selfish, they lack metta, and when a person or a group ruins one's conditions, then the person does not have patience, but the person holds grudge, hatred towards others. There will not be any forgiveness. In this way, a person who is selfish does not have patience, forgiveness, or sacrifice. Selfishness becomes strong within the person. The person who does not want the welfare of others is overwhelmed by this selfishness, and thus there will not be any patience, forgiveness, or sacrifice. So the person becomes cruel, entertaining dosa, anger, hatred. Lack of metta, when there is lack of metta, lack of loving kindness, there is hatred kind of dosa. When one lacks karuna, compassion, there is cruelty kind of dosa. So one tries to gain victory on others in improper way. Having victory on others in improper way, it may be called victory in the worldly sense, but the person is losing to himself, to herself. When the person has lobha, dosa, moha, defilements, ordinary kind of defilements, and extreme kind of defilements, when the person cannot overcome these internal enmity, then one is said to be losing to oneself, and one commits misconduct by body, speech, and mind. Not being able to have victory in the internal enmity, one commits wrongdoing such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slandering, harsh speech. One wants to take other people's belongings by force. One wants to ruin others. And one also has wrong view, not knowing that good deeds bring good results, bad deeds bring bad results. In this way, having these defilements, one commits misconduct by body, speech, and mind. Having this internal enmity, one also commits wrongdoing and unwholesome deeds. So long as one has not eradicated these defilements, not having good control of oneself, one commits transgressions and misconduct. Doing transgressing these wrongdoings, one is losing on oneself. One may be gaining victory on others in improper way, but one is losing to oneself. When one does not know the way to avoid, to prevent, to cure, and to uproot these defilements, then one is entertaining internal enmity. Having internal enmity, one can have social problems such as tension, stress, and depression. When one indulges in these defilements, when one indulges in raga, dosa, moha, there will be enmity. Having enmity, there can be frightening danger. When one has done wrongdoing, then there can be self-blame, attanuvādabhaya, self-blame or self-criticism. Due to the wrongdoing, others criticize the person, blame the person. So this is the second kind of danger, paranuvādabhaya, being blamed, being criticized by the society. When one commits wrongdoing, there can be bad response. The others can take revenge, and there can be bad resultants. So it is said that there are more than 30 types of bad results. Committing wrongdoing, when one is breaking the law, then the person can be punished by law. It is called dandabhaya, being punished by law or being in the danger of bad results. When one commits wrongdoing with bad intention, this bad intention can lead to bad results, such as dogadibhaya, being reborn into lower existences. So these four kinds of frightening danger can arise when one has not extinguished the internal enmity. So that's why it is said that when one is not free from internal enmity, one can encounter four kinds of frightening danger. Buddha knew these bad results that can arise by wrongdoing. So Buddha guided beings in order to refrain from misconduct and wrongdoing, and Buddha guided beings to perform wholesome deeds with great compassion. With great compassion, Buddha guided the beings to refrain from things that should be refrained from and to perform things that should be performed. The internal enmities are the most frightening kind of enemies, and one should practice in order to overcome the internal enmity. Buddha had given ways how to overcome them. One should avoid, one should refrain from certain things in order to overcome gross defilements. One should make a vow not to do this, not to do certain things in the way of refraining in order to overcome gross defilements. So Sayadaw gave an example. If there is a territory occupied by the enemy, one should avoid oneself from going to the territory of the enemy. In the same way, one should avoid oneself, one should refrain from committing wrongdoings in the way of overcoming gross defilements. The obsessive defilements that can manifest in the mind should be prevented and cured. One should be mindful so that one can prevent kilesa defilements from entering into the mind. In order to prevent defilements from arising, one should be mindful of every arising object by practice of satipatthana. When one lacks mindfulness, kilesa defilement can arise, and by being mindful, one removes defilement. When lack of mindfulness, these defilements arises, one should remove it by being mindful. Latent and dormant form of defilement should be suppressed and uprooted. So one has to develop Vipassana jnana, insight knowledge, Magga jnana, supermundane knowledge, in order to suppress and uproot the latent or dormant form of defilement. In this way, there are 3 ways in order to overcome 3 stages of defilement. By practicing according to these methods, one can remove gross, medium, and refined form of defilements that has been following throughout the samsara. So one should practice Sila Samadhi Panya in order to prevent, cure, suppress, and uproot these defilements. As much as one can practice, one will be able to overcome the internal enmity, and one will gain victory on these defilements. By practicing the 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Lobha, greed, will become less and less. Dosa, anger, aversion, will become less and less. And Moha, delusion, will become less and less. So by practicing the 3 trainings, these defilements will become weaker and weaker. When the defilements are strong, one tries to gain victory on others in improper way. When one has a good control of oneself, by overcoming internal enmity, one will no longer try to gain victory on others in improper way. Having a good control of oneself, one will not be hurting others, and thus one is said to be protecting others. By controlling oneself, one protects others from being hurt. Practicing Sila Samadhi Panya, one becomes a true human. One will have a humane mind, and one will have humane knowledge, and one does not hurt others. One protects others from being hurt. In this way, there will be peacefulness within oneself, and one is also contributing peace to others. By practicing the three trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, one's own world will be peaceful, and also one will be contributing peace in the surrounding. So, if there are a big number of people practicing the three trainings, making one's own world peaceful, the world making up of each person will also be peaceful. So one can imagine how the world will be if the number of people who practice the three trainings grow more and more. As a conclusion of this Dhamma talk, Sayadaw wished that our Asian relatives, world relatives, samsara relatives, and Dhamma relatives practice the Dhamma according to the teachings of the Buddha. And when all of us here are giving help in the Dhamma, may you all be able to accept this Dhamma gift cherishingly. May you be able to make use of this Dhamma gift cherishingly, so that may you all be able to gain benefits. May you all be able to gain benefits to a complete level, so that one will have assurance within one life. So Sayadaw concludes this Dhamma talk, and Sayadaw would like to add on, by practicing the Dhamma that has the quality of uplifting, supporting the practitioner who practices the Dhamma systematically, so that the practitioner will not be degraded, the practitioner will not be inferior. So may we all be able to practice the Dhamma and keep the Dhamma blood within ourselves warm, and may we all march towards the peace of the world together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.